So in this tutorial, we are going to be drafting this very particular front bodice that looks like sort of a corset, then with a very detailed design in the front down to the waistline, just as you can see on the screen. Then, okay, so this is my front bodice block. This is my front bodice block already drafted out. I have my bust point. There's the bust point, the under bust, also the waistline. And I have my side bust dart and also my waist dart. As you can see, I dotted my neckline because this is not the neckline I'm going to be using. This very particular dress has a canoe neckline. So I dotted it out because I'm not going to be using that neckline. I'll be going in by 1.5 inches from my shoulder off to the armhole area, that's off to the shoulder point where I'll be joining the sleeve. Then I'll be coming down from my neckline by 2.5 inches. So I'll be joining this to the 1.5 inch just to create that canoe neck look. I'll be joining this now together just to create that canoe neck look. So I haven't joined these together now. So I haven't joined this together now. As you can see, it's going to give me the canoe neck design, as you see as we continue in this video. I haven't done this now. I'm going to be contouring this pattern to give me that very corset effect. So I'm going to be taking the measurement from my bust point to the under bust. That's the distance from my bust point to the under bust. I'm supposed to, after taking the distance, if you have a compass, you're going to be placing your compass on your pencil on a ruler to get that exact distance measurement. Then pin your compass down to your bust point and make a circle using that very particular distance measurement. But because I don't have a compass, this is the trick I use. I can't place my hand on a compass now, so this is the trick I normally use for this very effect, to get that rounded corset effect, so that I can have my details and not be doing a guesswork when I'm sewing and doing the stitches. Okay, so I'll be going around by that measurement, which is about almost 2.5 inches, but not 2.5, 2.45 thereabout, 2.45 inches. So I'll be going round from the bust point. Just watch closely from the bust point. I'll be going round by that 2.5, 2.45 inches, which is the distance from my bust point to my under bust. So I haven't gone round. I'm going to be joining the circle, the dots. I'm going to be joining the dots with my hands, making sure every line is joined accordingly. Every dot that I created is joined accordingly, so as to have that circular effect that a compass would also give. That's what I'm doing now. I'm actually joining with my hands so as to have that circular effect. Compass is actually it's very easy to come by. You can find it in the mathematical set, okay? It's not something that is difficult to. So if you want to save yourself the stress, you just get a compass. It's also, I just wanted to show this so I can also show you the trick that I use to do this. So after doing that, I'm going to be contouring my under bust area so as to give it the very tight fitting that you see on a corset also. So I'll be going in from the center, from my waist, from the under bust dart. I'll be going in by 0.8 inches. 0.8 inches. I'll be marking 0.8 inches on both sides from my under bust. 0.8 inches on both sides from my under bust. 0.8 inches on both sides. And I'll be using my ruler to join this to the bust point from the waist dart line to the bust point. I'll be using my ruler to join this now to the waist dart line and also then to the bust point. So having done this now, from the dress we're drafting, we are recreating, you could see that there is an armhole princess seam which went from the armhole down to her bust point. There's an armhole princess seam at that very corset fitting area, that very corset detailed part. So we're also going to having our own armhole princess seam. And I went from the top of my shoulder to 3.5 inches. This very particular area is optional. You can go by 2 inches, 3 inches, whatever armhole princess seam distance you want to go from. I decided to use 3.5 inches. It's not a standard though. You can use whatever you want. So I connected it to the bust point. From that armhole, I used my French cuff to connect it to the bust point. And having done that, I'm going to be using my hand to give it, sort of smoothen it some places, to give it a kind of that, that bust shape, to smoothen it down to the bust, under bust, to give it that kind of a bust shape. So having done that, now I'm going to be manipulating my darts to get my armhole princess seam. So having done that, I'm going to be manipulating my darts to get my armhole princess seam. Okay. So since that is ready, I'll be going down from the neckline to 1 inch after the armhole line. 1 inch after the armhole line, just to create that effect that is in front before the corset. Just to create that effect that is in front before the corset. Just watch closely, you understand what I'm trying to say. That effect that is with another fabric, another color of fabric. So I'll be going in by 1/2 inch from my center front, and I'll be connecting this line to this circular, to my bust circumference. Yeah, to my bust circumference. I'll be connecting this line to my bust circumference. You can go in by 1 inch, but I suggest 1 inch should be the maximum you should go in by. So I'll be connecting it to that, to my bust circumference, okay, to create that detailed design there. So having done that now, I went ahead to put my notches where necessary. I stopped at that point. I went ahead to put my notches where necessary. So having done that, now we're going to be manipulating the pattern, just like I said earlier on, to get our princess seam. And this is exactly what we're going to do. I'm going to be closing up the side bust dart and opening it at the armhole. You cut to and not through. I have a tutorial on my channel on how to get an exact princess seam, which will fit very closely to your body and give you that very nice fitting. So you can also check my channel for that tutorial, okay? I have a princess seam tutorial on my channel. I went ahead to tape it down. I've closed my bust, my side bust dart, and I went ahead to tape it down just so I can open it at the armhole, thereby creating a princess seam. So having done that now, I'm going to be taking out my waistline dart, the underbust dart. I'm going to be cutting out these darts from the waistband dart. Just go through the shape that you already have marked out with your pen. I'm going to be cutting out my waistline dart, the underbust dart. So having cut these darts now, for the sake of the design we are creating, I'm going to be cutting out my waist from the under bust. I'm going to be separating the under bust and the waistline, so they are different. The reason why I'm doing this is I want to join the dart. I want to close up the dart so that when you're cutting on your fabric, you don't have to sew that waistline dart. It has to be plain, just as you can see on that design on the screen. It's plain. There's no kind of sewing there. So you have to close up the dart on the pattern paper. So when you're cutting on your fabric, you'll be having a whole piece and there wouldn't be any need joining. So I'm going to tape this down right now. I'm going to tape this down right now. And I haven't taped it down. Be sure you label your center front, the side front, where is up and down, so that you don't mix up things when you're cutting on your fabric, okay? So having done this, I'm going to set this aside and I work on the corset design. Not really a corset, kind of, but it's close to it. Not really a detailed corset, but it's close to it. So this very particular pieces now, this very particular pattern piece will be cut in 2 pieces. As you can see, I've labeled. I'm going to cut them in 2 pieces each. So you also do same when you're cutting on your fabric. You're going to be cutting in 2 pieces each when you're cutting on your fabric. And remember, the center front has to be on fold. Be sure everything is in alignment. Yes, cut in 2 pieces. Make sure you're going to cut everything in 2 pieces. So now, for the sake of that design, I'm going to be separating this very particular part of this pattern. I'm going to be separating this very particular part of this pattern so that the details of this very dress will be shown accurately in this tutorial. So having separated it now, I'm going to be attaching it to the under bust and the waistline pattern. I'm going to be attaching it to this very pattern now. Using my masking tape, I'm going to be attaching it to this very pattern. I'm trying to cut out every excess that is there from the masking tape. So having done that now, this is the 3 pieces that we'll be needing for this very tutorial. We'll be needing these 3 pieces for this tutorial, and everything will be cut in 2. So I got a different color of paper so that the details of this dress will be shown. Okay, I got a very different color paper, so details of this dress will be shown. As I've labeled, you have to cut this very part on fold, which is my center front. Then the other part that has a curvy shape, you are not going to cut it on fold because you're going to be attaching the fabric to that place. So having done that now, I'm using my pen to trace out this particular design. This white paper serves as your fabric. If you're cutting on your fabric, you're going to do this exact same thing. After drafting the pattern, you now place on your fabric to cut. Just make sure you add your sewing allowance all round after cutting. After tracing out, make sure you put in your sewing allowance all round, okay? Before you cut, make sure you put in your sewing allowance all round. So I'm tracing out this exact shape here. Be careful so that you get the exact shape. And also put your notches where necessary. As you can see, I've marked the bust point notch and also the under bust, which is clearly obvious that this is the under bust. Also the armhole line where the armhole started from the shoulder down to where it stopped before I took my princess seam line, I also marked that notch. So having done that now, I'm going to be cutting out. But if on your fabric you'll be adding your sewing allowance all round, half-inch sewing allowance all round before you cut out. So since this is a paper, I didn't bother adding any sewing allowance, but that's okay. So I'm going to be cutting it all round now. Be careful you cut. Be careful while cutting so that you get the exact shape, and when you're sewing you don't have difficulties trying to fix it up to match with the shape of the other parts of the pattern pieces. So having cut this now, as I've cut this out now, I'm going to open it up, and you have to see that it's going to be a single piece. Okay, I'll be marking my notches now with my scissors, just as you do on your fabric. Also, you mark notches with your scissors so that you don't make any mistake, and while sewing it will be easier for you. As I've opened it now, you're going to be having a singular piece. You're going to be having a singular piece of this. Okay, having done that, now we'll move over to the next pattern piece also, this very particular one, and I'm going to be cutting in two pieces, also with a different color of paper, so that the very details will be shown. I'm going to be cutting this also on two pieces. Yes, the need for this different color of paper is, as you can see from the screen, the dress has two different colors of fabric, so I need to use two different colors of paper so that you see the details clearly. So also I'm going to trace this out on this fresh pattern paper. This is actually, the white paper is not a pattern paper, it's actually an exercise book. If you have another color of paper that is flexible enough that you can use for pattern, you can use. Cardboard paper is actually very strong, so I didn't use cardboard paper. It's very rigid. So if you have something lighter that you can use, or I prefer this, or a white pattern paper. But a white pattern paper, I didn't get a white paper in the market, so I had to use an exercise book. So having traced this out and marked my notches where necessary, I'm going to be cutting it out. Be sure you mark your notches. It's going to help you while sewing. As you still see the reason why in this video. It's going to help you while sewing. So I've marked my bust point notch, and this very pattern now is in two pieces. So having done that now, the remaining third pattern, I'm going to be cutting it using a brown paper so as to differentiate it from the other patterns, which I use the white paper to cut. So I'll also be getting a two piece of this. And as you can see, I'm cutting the center front, which is a straight line on fold. There are no curves there, so I'm going to be cutting it on fold. I've labeled on fold, so I'm going to be cutting it on fold. Also on your fabric, you have to cut this very part on fold. So I'm going ahead to trace what the design looks like down to the fresh pattern paper. Be careful while tracing so that you get the exact shape that you've drafted. So I'm going ahead to trace it all down. And also mark your notches where necessary. If you're cutting on your fabric, you want to mark you want to mark the notches of the waistline, that so that when you're joining, it will be easier for you and you don't do guesswork on where the notches are, so they meet exactly, and when you put on your dress, it's going to fit very nice. So I haven't done this now. I'm going to be cutting this out. So this is this pattern as a whole. Just like I said before, the darts that we joined, that's the reason why we joined the dart. Now, if you cut this as a whole, even on your fabric, you're not going to be having any joining. You're going to be having a fabric that is plain on whole, plain and whole. There isn't going to be any seam joining because you've already done that with your pattern paper. So when you're going to be sewing this now, you're going to be joining from one side of your bust, that's one side of the corset kind of fitting, down to the under bust. Same with the other side. Okay, you start from the under bust. Just make sure that your notches that you've marked are in place. You can use a pin, put your notches in place, then you sew down. I'm also going to be showing you this right away. Make sure the notches are matched. You can use a pin. After pinning them down, before you can join the third different pattern. So now that I'm done doing this now, this is what it looks like. After sewing, this is what you should have. After sewing on your fabric, this is what you should have. Okay, now that I've done this, I'm going to be attaching the third pattern to this very particular design. So while attaching the third pattern, you want to go in first. That is right side facing right side. Right side of the fabric facing right side. Then you put your sewing machine needle, then raise the footer. Okay, you have to sew this part first. After sewing, use your scissors to mark some notches, the kind of do little cuts that are going to help you down. Then from there you sew down, and you're going to be having an exact fit, an exact design that is like this. So this is it for this tutorial. I hope you enjoyed yourself, and thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe.